for decades. Julia Grosso from Vancouver to win it for Canada! Canada came! Canada conquered! Canada gold at Tokyo 2020!
You're listening to the Northern Fútbol Podcast, your home for everything Canadian soccer, with Brendan Dunlop, Alex Gangué-Ruzic, and here's your host, Ben Steiner.
Hey there, folks, and welcome back into the Northern Fútbol Podcast. It's episode 185 of Northern Fútbol, and a lot of stuff has happened since Brendan and I last reconvened for episode 184 after the first Drone Gate breaking news. But Alex and Brendan both on this one alongside myself, Ben Steiner. Alex, Brendan, how you guys doing? It's been quite a few days.
When you told Alex and I that you were working 15 jobs here during the Olympics and how immersive that you can be in general, I said, well, just pace yourself. Like, those 17 days are heavy. There's a lot. Oh, by the way, here's an extra 5 days worth of stuff. Oh, and Canada soccer would be crumbling in any other era. Yeah, good. How's it? How you doing, Alex?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. All things considered, I clearly have learned that you can't really leave the house for much, because I left the house to go on a hike/swim on Thursday, and so much happened that we Bev ends up getting removed for the rest of the tournament. We needed to do an emergency record. I didn't even make it home in time for, and then Saturday I was about to go out on just a quick hour bike ride, and Ben's texts us like, the FIFA appeals just dropped, or the FIFA sanctions just dropped. It feels like anytime you try to do anything, unless it's like the middle of the night in France, like you're posing a pretty big risk of missing important news right now.
I was driving to Columbus. I had got tickets long ago and thought, if I'm not working the Olympics with you, Ben, I'm going to go on this road trip, watch Aston Villa against the MLS Cup champion Columbus Crew. Well, Cucho's amazing, and the Crew were great. Villa were horrible. But on this drive, I start to get just trickle text. I'm like, what does this mean? Miriam Karabi texts me, like, oh, wow, I can't believe this. I'm like, I have no idea what would have happened. And 10 minutes later, I get a call from Aaron Dutra. Can you come on the show? Aaron, just fill me in. What happened? You seriously don't know? No. Oh, man. So you can't come on the show. I'm like, I guess we both have an agenda here. I need to learn what happened, and you need to get a guest. Go get your guest. I'll fill it in. So there was no American news coverage, but I learned very quickly the gravity of the situation. And, yeah, I knew that we'd be doing a pod again soon, boys.
Yeah, it was certainly caught me by surprise. I actually got a call from Switzerland, and it was an unknown number from Switzerland. I was out for a run. I thought, I had an hour in my schedule. I can go for a run. That's a rarity during my Olympic hours. And then I'm standing by Union Station, about to go in and take the train back to my apartment, and I get a call from Switzerland. Pick up the call. Oh, it's FIFA PR giving me a heads up that they're releasing this, statement of the sanctions. And I'm like, okay, I have to deal with this. So I walk home through the path in Toronto and deal with it all on my phone, get back to my computer, quickly get changed, get to my work by 4, and it was just a chaotic night. But even Alex, you said
before we get into Alex, hold on, everything about what you just said is amazing. So 60 seconds to break that down. So he found time to squeeze in a run, Alex, you caught that? But then just before he went on the subway to go back home, as opposed to running back home, right? Or including the loop in his running plan. FIFA PR calls him to give him a heads up that they're going to drop a bombshell. Well connected, my man. I also love how you just slip that in. Like, that's just another Saturday afternoon in the world of Ben Steiner.
Well, Alex, you also said that, if it's in the middle of the night in France, nothing's going to happen. I think it was 3 a.m. France time that Bev Priestman got kicked off. Because there was nobody else in the CPC office or anything, and so everyone in France was asleep except seemingly, I assume, Bev Priestman and the Canadian Olympic Committee, who were releasing that statement at that hour.
Let's say, I guess we'll call that the exception. That hey, because there's one thing that the French love. They love sleep and they love days off. They are going to respect their boundaries. Maybe they're probably like, these darn Canadians, man. No respect for French convention of no work after the work hours.
Yeah, I'm not checking my email unless it's between 9:30 and 4:30. That's it.
Well, that's why I'm paid to log on after 4:30 and stick around until the wee hours of the morning. But a bit of a timeline of what's happened in the last, 5 days or so. Canada beats New Zealand 2-1. That comes after, all of the initial drone stuff that Brendan and I spoke about on our last show. And then Kevin Blue spoke to the media on Friday, as did John Herdman during his Leagues Cup press conference, while Christine Sinclair made a statement on Instagram. Later that day, TSN's Rick Westhead reported on drone usage by John Herdman ahead of Canada's clash with Honduras in 2021 during CONCACAF World Cup qualifying. And ESPN also later reported about instances of Canada spying on the U.S. ahead of matches. Both of those reports were quite pertinent, given that Herdman denied use of drones at an Olympic Games or a World Cup in his media availability, and a more coy language from John Herdman. We've certainly been used to that, and that certainly stood out to me when he said Olympics or World Cup when he was talking.
That he had included World Cup unprovoked, you mean?
That he said there was no scouting at an Olympics or a World Cup, but he didn't, just say it outright.
World Cup qualifiers, or Gold Cups, or Nations League, or whatever the heck else Canada plays in.
Right. I really love when we talk about like the same thing and have interpreted differently, because I interpreted that in his forced emphasis of the World Cup to illustrate like, oh, I went to a World Cup like with the men's team as well. I kind of felt like it was not a trumping of what like Bev has done and what we're looking at, but just as to say like, look, I've taken these teams to the biggest stages possible, not just the one stage, but both. But yeah, I guess you're right. Just to rinse his hands clean. Don't worry, you're gotta go digging about Qatar. Definitely didn't use any drones in Qatar. That was somebody else. There's a lot of fans flying drones in Qatar.
And Alex, it was certainly a pretty continuous news cycle as well. Of course, just the news bullets kept flying over the weekend.
Yeah, just kind of continuing through this timeline here. Just a key takeaway to round off Friday from Kevin Blue's availability is that he mentioned that Jesse Marsh had been approached about drone usage, but didn't engage in it. And then Matthew Shinetti of TSN, of course, confirmed on Twitter, saying that Jesse Marsh was indeed approached by a staff member, but then Marsh shot down the idea, saying that he didn't really believe in that. So obviously that was a big bonus point for Jesse Marsh. You can't seem to get anything wrong right now with everything that he's said and everything he's done. Of course, that led us to Saturday and my failed bike ride. The news was in the morning. Canada would be docked 6 points at the Olympics. Joseph Lombardi, Jasmine Mander, Bev Priestman suspended from all footballing activities for a calendar year. And Canada would be fined over $300,000 Canadian. It was around 200,000 Swiss francs, of course, FIFA based in Switzerland. And then meanwhile into Sunday, Bev Priestman made a bit of a surprise statement pregame, bit of an odd timing, through a lawyer kind of supporting the team and saying that she'll do what she can to help with the process. Of course, doesn't sound like that statement was well received based on the timing. For the players, it's obviously a tense situation now in that regard. And clearly the players showed it. They go out and get a dramatic win over France. Vanessa Gilles makes a pretty legendary speech, one that might live on years to come, especially depending on how the rest of this Olympics goes, saying, we're not cheaters, we're damn good players, we're a damn good team, and we proved that today.
Yeah, and Brendan, what a wild couple of days, man. No, just kind of picking up on all that. Like Kevin Blue's presser on Friday feels like it was 3 weeks ago. Like that feels like such a long time ago. I've been asked a lot. I'm sure you guys would get into it, but I did a couple of radio hits this morning, and both Ottawa and Toronto asked, there's 6 points. Like, where does that number come from? Do you think that's fair? Is that too harsh? And I never say this, but man, I think FIFA got it so right. Though I think 6 points is harsh, I think FIFA got it so right. And if it wasn't for the proactive policing of Canada soccer, I do think that FIFA's punishment would have been harsher. I do think they may have kicked them out, or they would have slapped them with a 10-point penalty, which means they would not have got out of the group. It would have made the last two games completely a wash, but they would have forced them out there to like embarrass them and humiliate them more and the program in the country, which I think would have been way worse. So 6 points still gave them a chance, right? Made it a mountain, but like still gives them a chance. They beat Colombia and they get through, and we're still talking about them playing matches. Like that's pretty remarkable considering all that's gone on, I think.
I think it was harsh. I think the 3 points, or even, a middle ground of 4, even 5 points, could have been fine. But I thought that 6 points was harsh, especially given, the grandeur of an Olympics or a World Cup where it comes around every 4 years. I thought 6 points plus the other sanctions, like the fine is not a small amount of money either. I thought it was a little bit over the top. Maybe they were thinking that we're going to give this punishment. There's going to be a CAS appeal, which there is, to the ad hoc committee at Paris 2024, and then they're able to track it back, and maybe that was, an expectation. But I did think it was quite harsh in terms of a penalty.
Yeah, I thought 6 points I'd agree right away. Just that out of 9 available for the group stages, to take away 6 is incredibly harsh. I do understand going to some sort of penalty, especially that if you feel the New Zealand game was compromised. Again, I think it's something where, of course, this is cheating, no doubt. This is a huge deal, and this is definitely something that doesn't reflect well on the Canadian soccer staff that were implicated in this, specifically Bev Priestman and her staff. But at the end of the day, I think it was something where the words, spying and just that sort of implication that something like that brings didn't actually fit what happened in the sort of advantage Canada gained, especially in terms of the athletes themselves, the players, and what they gained from it. I just felt that, it would the best punishment would be one that, of course, gets those implicated and potentially kind of, gets a hefty fine for the federation. I just thought, 6 points really punished the athlete. And credit to Canada, the fact that they've already put themselves in a position where, they go in the last game and it's win and you're in. But I thought just 6, because, okay, fine. If you think the New Zealand game's compromised, wipe it, 3 points. Fair enough. But the fact is that they got punished for a second game where, there's the one side of, would they have cheated if they don't get caught? Probably. I think that's fair to implicate, but also at the same time, they did get caught. They got 3 members removed to their staff. The players have had to deal with this huge psychological burden. Another 3 points on top of that just felt like a bit excessive relative to everything that occurred in the context of the whole situation.
They are setting a precedent, though, right? That's the point. Like, we are all aware that there's other forms of cheating. We are aware. You hear the general public acting as though this has never happened, and I continue to go back to, and apologies to the people that listen to the show that hate baseball. There's at least one writer. This is the Astros and the cheating scandal, where we knew sign stealing was happening across the board, but they did it so egregious or sophisticated, however you want to say it, and that's what got them caught. FIFA is setting a precedent that, like, look, this is tarnishing our name. It's tarnishing the sport. Like, we can't have this at all. So I think that the 6 is a middle ground, and then it avoids. I think you're right about the appeal, because they could have done 10 points and forced them to go out there. They would have appealed, and maybe it comes down to 6, or maybe it doesn't happen before. I think that would be way worse. Where 6 is like, look, there's no flex here. Where we've allowed you to stay in the tournament. You still have a chance to advance, but don't do this shit again. And nobody, everybody else, think twice. Be smarter about your cheating, like us. That's FIFA.
I think also, though, we have to remember, though, it is also the context of it. I think the fact that it is at the Olympics, a pinnacle of fair sport, a pinnacle of sportsmanship, that it is Canada, it does feel like being an example is being made of. And, again, I don't mind that. For me, for FIFA, it's just, that's probably the hardest thing to levy in this. Where I think if FIFA had more of a track record of showing good ethics with situations where ethics are clearly compromised, like, for me, again, it's just not at all the same comparison. But I think, for example, the fact that there's a literal coach on the sideline of one of the teams, Zambia, who's been implicated with some pretty terrible allegations. The fact that he gets to continue in his job, no suspension while anything is investigated. Of course, it's, again, completely different situations. But I think the fact that Canada was caught cheating at an Olympics made this story, not to say made the story bigger than what it was, because I don't think that's fair. I think this is probably going to open up some interesting layers of, this sport encourages a lot of marginal gains and people willing to push the line. You see it with diving, you see it with other areas of the sport where it's going to open up some interesting ethical questions about the sport itself. But I just find coming from FIFA, it's a bit inconsistent, a bit almost rich, given some of their history of handling stuff like what I mentioned, or other issues of racism and other things that like. I think this was just one thing where, because it's the Olympics, because FIFA's name was put on in the spotlight, they felt that they had to act accordingly and went maybe a bit harsher than usual because of that.
And we'll jump into your questions as well, and we'll jump to a question from @JOnTheSpot12. After reading Ben's article on the clash of eras, do you guys think that despite the enormous damage, there's a silver lining for Blue and that he can make further reforms with justification from the review? He'll never have a better opportunity to remove toxic culture from the CSA. And I would say there's a big opportunity here for Kevin Blue if he can figure it out financially, because of course Bev Priestman does have a contract with the CSA through 2027. And so that's something that they're going to have to navigate, but it is an opportunity for Blue to really, finish putting his stamp, at least on the senior level. Because as we've learned in the last couple of days, this has been an issue at the youth level as well.
It's interesting, right? Because I also love that you went there first to the finances, and I'm assuming you think that there's no way Bev survives this. I think if the room wants her to stay, she stays. It's as simple as that. Even though they would have to deal with sponsors and Kevin Blue and the program would have to explain it. If the team wants her to stay, she's there. I think Kevin Blue has proven to be he trusts his soccer people, right? And I mean, her players would be the highest really voice that he would, I think, trust and believe in, and he'd figure out the rest of the stuff. When it comes to what money might be available if she left, or how they figure out separating and then paying her out, that's where it gets really complicated. I kind of feel like we can't get to that stage until the games are over. But for Kevin Blue, he's already taking the steps to turn the organization into a more professionalized outfit in general, and he's already found ways to get money that people in that position previously were incapable of doing. So I do trust that they'll kind of figure out what the next steps are. But in terms of how much like culture cleaning they need to do, I think so much has already been done. I don't think there's a long list before. We had this conversation before Qatar. It's completely different. We're literally talking about every level that needs to be clean. Whereas I think this is, there's been a lot of turnover already. I think we're already seeing his stamp.
On your perspective about whether the team wants her back, do you think they do?
So they haven't really. It sounded pretty clear that, a gap between what the players, been saying about the staff and how they've kind of separated themselves from this whole situation, that it does feel a bit far aligned to ever walk back over again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, maybe I was a bit naive to think that they were more united or more in Bev's camp, let's say. Sheridan's always pretty pointed. Yeah, she doesn't hide too much. She doesn't leave a lot to be read between the lines. Very clear and direct. That to me is probably like the most pointed, where I'm like, as I digest that the day after, I'm like, yeah, maybe Alex and you guys are right that it's impossible for her to win the room back. So in which case, yeah, Kevin Blue will figure out immediately what's the best way for the organization to move on and start afresh.
I want to say, just to one point to the contract thing, Brendan, is also, I mean, we don't know the inner workings of this contract, but it is worth noting that usually there is some, clauses that when, something like this happens where you get banned for a year by FIFA, or, there's some sort of ethics clause that could lead to termination with cause, right? Where it could lead to just both parties to rip up the contracts. Usually there's, a certain level of conduct that has to be maintained. Of course, we don't know this contract. This was signed before Kevin Blue, but that's just something to consider. But yeah, no, it definitely feels like for Kevin Blue, of course, not an ideal scenario to deal with. But I think at the same time, Kevin Blue is shown to be an incredibly poised leader among tough times, among good times. He knows how to handle himself. And of course, so far since he's come in, for a lot of it for his own doing. It's been a lot of good times for Canada to start. But now to see how he's navigated this scandal, he's been very direct. He's made sure to help out. For example, in these investigations, he's been swift in his judgment. I think it's impressed, and it's exciting to see what he can do going forward, especially now. Of course, it's not an ideal situation, but he's been handed a scenario where he can continue to clean things up. He's inherited this scandal. How does he recover from it? So definitely a huge few months ahead for Kevin Blue.
And as mentioned earlier, on the pitch, Canada continued their Olympic campaign amid all the chaos, defeating France in a dramatic must-win match, one that saw France take a lead in the 42nd minute through Marie-Antoinette Katoto, before Canada responded in the 58th minute with an equalizer from Jessie Fleming and a 102nd minute winner from Vanessa Gilles. And Brendan, you've been in the CBC Sports office during the Olympic Games. You can imagine the reaction when Canada scored the 102nd minute winner. One person who will remain unnamed says, "Is that offside?" Because it looked potentially offside. You question any goal these days.
You thought it was offside, eh, Ben? You were worried. You didn't want to celebrate. You thought it was offside.
You never want to celebrate a goal these days. Especially one that comes off a rebound. But just electric in the way that Canada was able to get that goal, and I thought that was one of the best halves, at least the second half, that Canada's played in years. Like, they were mad. They were pissed off.
They were.
It wasn't, let's have some fun, like Hoga Benito kind of thing. It was like just they were pissed off. They had a fire in their belly, and they showed it and won.
I loved so much of how that played out, but what I don't think I truly anticipated was that it would feel like a final. Right? How many times do we look at a final, the tale of two halves? Even this past Euro final, to me, that was so that, and you saw the quality come through. Mind you, we haven't spoken about France had injuries to two of their most important defensive players in the goalkeeper and Wendy Renard. That played some factor, certainly mentally, and I think that motivated Canada. What I love is that they were persistent. It wasn't a 10-minute high that like, oh, the keeper's out, let's go, and then they fizzle away because they got frustrated and they couldn't do it. Like, it continued to the end. Then you have a center back scoring with her left foot in the box. Like, let's go. I was very happy for Gilles. I was very happy for the end of that story, that game story to be what it was. It was thrilling, man. And this team has always been able to create these unforgettable, thrilling moments against the odds. Right? This is legal. This is ethical. This is different than before, where you're just dealing with general incompetence and a lack of funding. But like, that's in the DNA of this Canadian women's national team, to always come through against the odds.
And all I want to say is, do not forget Kaylin Sheridan about 97th or 98th minute. Ball falls to Marie-Antoinette Katoto. 3 goals this Olympic. Incredible striker. Sheridan flies over in some acrobatic split, just throws her hands up, gets a palm on it. One of the best saves in ever and for Canadian soccer, and just the fact, especially that just minutes later, that was one of those saves as soon as it happened. You know what? Maybe Canada is playing with a bit of destiny right now in terms of this actual game, because Katoto scores. Everyone's sad. Canada loses. They're out the tournament pretty much. But no, Sheridan gave them a lifeline. And Gilles, what I loved about the goal is just her celebration. The way, instead of running or, just running the bench, the way she just went down on her knees and just screamed, it kind of summed up how that Canadian team was feeling, where they just felt like they needed to let all this pent out frustration, anger from such a tough week for them. And it felt like that second half was like that, like you mentioned, Ben. It was mad. It was, it was just going out there and playing their soccer. And that's the best thing about Canadian teams. Canadian teams always seem to be at the best when they're underestimated, when they got a chip on their shoulder, when they're up against it. And the fact that, they were down 1-0 against the hosts, everything was against you, you need to win. The fact that we saw the best version of this Canadian team, one without their coach on the sideline, one amid all this, it shows that this is a good team. And that's also why maybe it's been frustrating at times to not see them play like this, because they have this in them. That they can really play like this. Like, the first half was frustrating because Canada wasn't clicking into gear. I think it was great for them to have a half like this, and hopefully they can build off this as a bit of an important moment.
And from at Zunderholtz, does Canada still not understand their best lineup? Why are Chloe Lacasse and Adriana Leon on the bench in a must-win game? I'd argue Viens over Prince just because of form at the club level. Elvin Viens, of course, delivering in that first game as well. But, when you look at the Canadian women's national team now, it's Annie Spence's Canadian women's national team at the moment, and he showed some, maybe boldness, individual thought, however you want to, put it, but it was a little bit different to see the Canadian team play under Spence than it was, necessarily in that first game when it was still very much Priestman's plans and she was going to come back into the picture. This is Spence's team for, these important games, and then we'll see about the future.
Yeah, what I was thinking actually was this Spence's touch, or was this the players taking the wheel? Because even, Becky, who we all know makes such a tremendous impact on and off the pitch. I do think that I don't know, in the past I think that she would start a game like that and they try and let's just hope we get to the 50th minute. Whereas this was, no, we'll trust the process. It's a build, and then you could have Max Becky at a moment that worked out incredible when you had France's two best defensive pieces off the pitch, right? So, yeah, I don't know how much credit I give to Spence, not to take it away, but I think that they're playing for each other as a team right now, and I think they're playing for him, and they definitely playing for each other, but playing with him and want to prove everybody wrong. They want a gold medal more than they did 3 years ago. Really, now I think that this is lit such a fire under them, and hopefully they're not fatigued going into Colombia. Physically and mentally, that 103 minutes was a lot, right? One of those elements is enough to be exhausted for a group deciding game. I just hope they got enough left in the tank, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it is perplexing though, because this was like the World Cup last year. For whatever reason, Canada just struggles out the gates to find their feet. And it always happens when the subs come in. I don't know if it's because I get that time to watch the game develop, see where the space is, see where things develop tactically. If Canada is just not preparing properly to address areas of strength and weakness on the opponent, it just feels like they always come out the gates just kind of slumbering. That first half for France, they were defending well, but the attack was just, it was woeful, really, for lack of a better word. The two strikers were on an island. Michelle Prince had a game low 12 touches at halftime. Ashley Lawrence kept drifting inside, which makes no sense because you're going to play a 3-5-2 with no wingers. You need your wingbacks to stay wide to stretch the field, especially when France is trying to defend so narrow. That was perplexing to me. But then again, it's I feel like a lot of changes for whatever reason. It's the same reason of Evelyne Viens continues to do great things off the bench, but then she starts, it just doesn't click. For some other players, same thing. It just feels like for whatever reason, I don't think Canada has found what the best way to start a game is. And now it's kind of, led me to wonder, what is the best way? Is it to maybe go, a bit more midfield heavy and just stem the tide and then just hope that you go gung-ho with your subs in the second half? Is it maybe start a bit more offensive just to try to shift momentum and get it in your favor? It's left me wondering, because this is a problem that dates back to last year's World Cup, and it leaves you because you're like, oh, it's good the subs are contributing, it's good, it's creating lineup problems, but then the real lineup problem is that you'd almost want everyone to start off the bench right now, because that's where all the fun happens, that's where all the good moments seem to happen for this Canadian team. So yeah, it's a huge question for Andy Spence to answer. I think there are some legitimate, you look at this past lineup. I like the idea of going with three in midfield. That was worth considering, but I feel like Ashley Lawrence has struggled this tournament. Do you consider maybe giving her a rest and giving Becky a go from the start? What the heck do you do with your two strikers? Is it time to give Viens a start? How the heck did Lacasse not play at all? That one's for you, Brendan. Yeah. The good news is that the back three has been solid, and Jessie Fleming's had two incredible games. So at least there's a solid base to build around heading into this Colombia game.
Yeah, for sure. You're totally right. The back three has been great. Khadisha has been incredible for someone who's lost a real star spot. She still started quite a bit for Chelsea, but there was some injuries there as well. She looks like such a superstar, and Gilles has become that even more so in the last couple of years. In the last season, I think, has taken leaps. And then have we mentioned Jade Rose? Like Jade Rose
been
is
Canada's best player this tournament for me, honestly.
elite.
Agreed.
Elite. Like, tell someone from another country she's not a professional athlete. It's insane, right? No one would believe you. You did make one point though that I find interesting because, man, I don't know if it's like it's definitely not a women's football trend, but there is just some teams that you're talking about the sluggish start and they've got the right pieces and what is it? Why do they need the super subs, or why do they look so different once there's an injection off the bench? I would say like Portugal's men's team is like that and been like that for 10 years. Hope Powell's England team was very criticized for that. That's why they never got over the hump, and then they went in a different direction after she was in that job for 15 or 17 years. You'll never see that again. Like, I do think that there are some programs that just kind of, I don't know if it gets stuck, but it just becomes their thing, where they figure it out in the match and they do enough to get the result that they need, but for some reason they can't do it from the start. And that you could say that that's maybe just one of the issues with international football as a whole.
I think, to be fair, at one point though, because it's like one thing we do notice is that Canada does tend to adjust from game to game, which is a good thing, right? You want to adjust to the strengths of your opponents. You're not going to throw out a double pivot if you're playing a box of the best four midfielders in the world and stuff like that. And but I do think one thing is, this Canadian team does struggle to find its identity in games, and I think that's something where perhaps maybe it takes the subs coming off the bench to provide that, or for whatever reason, because I think we know what this identity, this Canadian team should be, especially under the formation change. Like, there's a decent amount of pressing, it's controlled possession, it's comfort playing between the center backs, it's defending well in a low block, and the reality is, other than the defending in a low block, they struggled to put their other philosophies, their identity in the game, and maybe that's. I do wonder if perhaps they get a bit too caught up in what the opponent is looking to do, and forgetting as well that Canada, you're a good team. Like, there's, especially like in the New Zealand game, you should be going out and dictating play and really setting the tempo and not having to go down a goal to really take over. Of course, France, it's a different beast, but you should be able to go toe-to-toe. And I'm very curious to see now this Colombia game. Can Canada come out and set the tempo? Because, again, these are must-wins for games for them. I think that's also another thing that's tough for them. Canada always benefits with their style. They want the game to come to them, and that's why they're a good team in the knockouts. But it's different when you need to win games. You need to get that first goal, and I think that's also another thing that this Canadian team struggles to level with.
And of course, the Canadian team still with a game against Colombia to close out group play on Wednesday. And they need a win if they don't get the potential points back on their CIS appeal. If they do get some points back, that those permutations could change. But it's a win and you're in. A draw doesn't do them justice if it stays at -6 points. But the question from Blair Donnelly at Medic1849, what lineup changes are needed for a better matchup against Colombia? And surely this will be a faster paced game, and will we need players with pace and speed?
Yeah, I think for this Colombia team, of course, the big threats to watch out is that they have some of the best attacking talents in world football, and Linda Caicedo and Amira Ramirez. Of course, Myra Ramirez picked up a red card, as far as I'm aware. Usually that's a 1-game ban, so she should be back. It's just for Canada, be wary defensively. And I think this Jade Rose versus Linda Caicedo matchup is two exciting young talents that are just going to have an absolute heck of a time on that Canadian right flank. Ramirez, of course, going to give a lot for Gilles to deal with. Ramirez kind of struggles to find the net for Colombia, but she's a handful. Great hold-up play, makes great runs. Just not an easy player to defend. That's why Chelsea paid a lot of money to bring her in. But for Canada, I think the big thing is going to be offensively. They need goals. This Colombian team knows how to sit back in their 4-2-3-1, 4-4-2 at times, just muck things up. Canada, I think, is going to really need to overload the wide areas better than they have. They've really struggled to start games from wide areas. Again, I'll keep pointing to this because I don't know if this is tactical. I don't know if this is her. Ashley Lawrence keeps tucking in too much, and Canada needs her to provide width because Gabrielle Carl's doing an excellent job of bringing that on the left side. If Lawrence can stretch out wide, stretch that Colombian back line to have to defend the width of the field, that will open up space for a Fleming, who I think is going to be massive again if she can play those line breaking passes, and if Canada can have a bit more of a threat up front. So I'm wondering if this game could be one for Eveline Viens. I think she showed enough to earn a start. And I think you want a bit of speed as well. And like a Chloe Lacasse, she didn't play at all last game, so she better be fresh. And maybe put another winger alongside Lacasse, or maybe, just to get a bit of a different look. So I think Canada's going to really need to overload the wide areas and create some space centrally, and speed's the way to do that.
This could be the game where we see Spence's fingerprints all over it, right? Because he's reacting to the moment, adapting to the team. If it was tactical and strategic to not use Lacasse at all against France, I think she's got to start for exactly your point of fighting fire with fire and speed with speed, and also just her movement, which, they're not getting movement in the right places from Ashley Lawrence. I'm glad you highlighted that. I also feel like, do you think that I need to find another term here, but it seems as though Gabby Carl's on the clock. Like, I don't think that that she started with the intention of like playing 90 minutes. It almost seems like they're like, we need to make a movement. Okay, Gabby, come. And then they always find a way to adjust with her being removed.
I'm surprised because genuinely in the France game, I felt like Carl was just, was doing her job. That Lawrence, again, throw on Becky for Lawrence, keep Carl on. But of course, again, it's tough because Lawrence is so important to this team, and she still had some moments of quality. She nearly created some chances, but it definitely. But that's the uncomfortable thing that Canada has had at times. They've struggled to take off key players, of like a Leon, for example. She could have easily been taken out against New Zealand. And that's why I was surprised to see Leon taken out of the starting 11 for France, because she's kind of been one of those players. What happens with Lawrence? Do you kind of chalk this up as tactical problems? Do you chalk this up as just she needs a reset? Or do you make the bold move to take out a Becky? So I'm looking at that starting lineup. Gabrielle Carl deserves to go nowhere. But yet, like you mentioned, it always feels like her spot in the team is never fully guaranteed for her.
I would suspect that Janine Becky is not ready to go from the start. That you have a better chance of getting the last 40 minutes out of Becky and a bigger impact than trying to go the first 60. So I think that Becky stays on the bench, and then that might be the only situation to put her in for Gabby Carl again. But I think one of guaranteed Lacasse and Vienne start. I don't know if you get the same super sub bang from Leon that you get from those two. So I wonder how that works. As to do you bring Vienne on for the last 40 minutes and start Leon, or try and go the other way? Ben, what say you?
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting one. I think it's going to come down to just the fight that Canada can show. Like I know that you can look at the tactics, but I don't think that necessarily matters, because as we say, this Canadian team is better when they come off the bench. Seemingly whoever it is coming off the bench adds that extra spark. So I think it's going to come down to sort of the fight that they showed, and whether they can maintain that throughout the 90 minutes, because whether they get the 3 points or not, they want to finish top of the group if they get the 3 points, and if they don't, then they need to win anyways. So I think it's really going to come down to that fighting effort and that sort of pissed offness, for lack of a better word, that they played with yesterday. But that's all the time we've got for today's show, and that's all we've got here on the Nation Network on Northern Football. But for Alex Gangué-Ruzic and Brendan Dunlop, I've been Ben Steiner. Thanks so much for tuning in to Northern Football here, and remember to rate, subscribe, review the show wherever you get your podcasts as well.